Welcome, dear dreamer, to the Valley of Silent Hollow. Here, the air moves slowly, the stars are countless, and the stream hums like a lullaby that never ends. In this quiet place lives the Candle Witch, a gentle soul whose candles burn not with fire, but with moonlight, soft, silver light that soothes restless hearts and calms wandering thoughts. Tonight, her steps will take us through meadows, rivers, and quiet trees, where every flame is a blessing, and every whisper of wind is an invitation to rest. Let her gentle light guide you. Let the silver glow ease you, and let the hollow itself tuck you into peaceful sleep. Close your eyes, breathe deeply, and enter the dream. Twilight arrived like a breath held and then released. The long valley known as Silent Hollow drew in the last gold of day and let it fade into soft silver. Trees along the slopes lifted their dark arms and caught the first stars. A hush settled. It was a quiet made of moss, of water, of wind walking lightly through reeds. It was a quiet that asked nothing and gave peace. A path curved down from the ridge, pale as milk, where old shells and river sand had mixed with soil. Along that path, the Candle Witch walked. She walked slowly, as if not to disturb the gentle evening. Her steps were soft. Her cloak trailed through thyme and wild chamomile. Their scent rose in a thin, sweet ribbon and followed her like a small, kind ghost. The stream on her left talked to stones. It spoke in ripples and silver vowels. It slid over pebbles and leaned against the banks with a peaceful sigh. Dragonflies drifted low, wings like glass. The first bats drew slow circles over the water, calm and patient, as if they wrote round, quiet letters on the dim sky. A heron stood knee-deep, dream-still. Fish hardly dared to flick their tails. The Candle Witch paused where the stream widened into a shallow pool. She set down her basket. It was a plain basket, willow woven and gentle to the touch. Inside, wrapped in linen, lay glass jars with cork stoppers. They were clean and clear, polished to a restful gleam. Moonlight loved them. Moonlight loved anything that waited. She looked up through the birches. The moon had risen, not yet full, but generous. Its light was soft and even, like a hand smoothing silk. The witch lifted one jar and held it to the sky. She did not speak a spell. She did not call a name. She only breathed, slow and calm, and let the evening breathe with her. The trees breathed, the pool breathed, the earth breathed. The jar grew silver from within, the way a thought grows bright when it is kind. She set the first jar beside the water. She filled another and another. Each one caught a little of the moon and a little of the hush. Her hands moved with the ease of habit, with trust. She had done this for many nights, in many seasons. She knew how to bow to the quiet. She knew how to ask without asking. Across the valley, grasses waved in a low tide. Every blade wore a small dream of dew. Crickets tuned their soft instruments. An owl blinked from a beech branch, great and solemn and peaceful, as if it were a priest of the night. Far away, a bell in the village sounded once, then went to sleep again. The sound reached the hollow like a leaf floating on a slow river. The Candle Witch gathered her filled jars into the basket. Each jar shone with gentle silver, not hot, not sharp, but cool and calm. The light did not push shadows away. It befriended them. It made a place for them to rest. She touched the linen over the jars and felt the quiet hum of moonlit weight. That hum sounded like distant rain in summer. It sounded like a promise that did not hurry. She walked on. The path narrowed and bent toward a stand of furs. Their fragrance deepened the air. Needles whispered underfoot, a soft carpet laid by patient ears. The witch ran her fingers along the bark of one trunk. "Thank you," she said, though no one would have heard. The fir listened, as trees do, and held her gentle voice among its rings. At the heart of the hollow, the slope opened to a meadow. Wildflowers glimmered, pale blue and white, a quiet sky at the earth's edge. The stream traced a silver S, then another, stitching water to grass. Here, as always, the evening seemed to bow. The candle witch bowed back, for courtesy is a kind of magic that never fades. She set down her basket and took a small beeswax taper from her pocket. It was unlit, but it smelled sweet, like honey. And Sunday, she did not light it with fire. Fire would have felt loud here, too quick, too bright. She uncorked one moon jar and tipped the glass just a little over the taper's wick. The moonlight slid down like slow milk. It touched the wick and flowered. A soft glow rose, silver and gentle, as peaceful as a deep breath taken in a quiet room. The candle did not flame. It dreamed. It held the moon the way a calm heart holds sleep. The witch cupped the light and smiled with her whole face. Around her, moths drifted nearer, pale wings folding and unfolding like soft hands. They did not burn. They bathed. The glow washed the meadow in a thin, tender tide. She set the candle on a smooth stone. Then she lifted another jar and another taper. Each touch of moonlight made a new, quiet brightness. She placed the lights as if placing thoughts, one by the curve of the stream, one near a cluster of bedstraw, one at the broken stump where beetles sometimes rested. She moved slowly. She breathed. The hollow breathed with her. The first stars grew clearer. They looked like seeds pressed into velvet. The air cooled and tasted of mint and water. Somewhere, a fox stepped carefully along the far fence. It paused, watched, then sat, calm, tail curved to its feet. The silver light did not startle it. It soothed. The fox blinked, long and soft, and let its head rest on its paws. A name went through the grass, a whisper made of thin sound and leaf sound and stream sound. Candle witch, not sharp, not fearful, a greeting. The hollow said her name the way rain says the name of earth. The witch lifted her head and listened. "I am here," she answered, simply. Her words were small boats. They floated. They left no wake. She took a final jar and held it to the sky. The moon lay steady above the ridge, patient and kind. The jar drank quietly. When it was full, she corked it and held it close, as one holds a sleeping bird. "For later," she murmured, "for someone who needs a gentle dream." The thought warmed her, the way tea warms fingers in winter, the way a soft blanket warms shoulders at the edge of sleep. She looked over the meadow. The silver lights marked the curve of water, the slope of grass, the patient bark of trees. Nothing blazed, nothing shouted. All things rested in their shapes. A breeze moved like a hymn with no words. The stream answered with a low, peaceful chord. The owl agreed with a single soft note, then quieted again. The candle witch lifted her basket. The jars clinked with a tender music, moon against moon. She followed the path toward the line of beeches and the shadow of her cottage beyond. As she went, the hollow seemed to follow too, not with steps, but with presence. Grass, water, wind, stars, walking beside her in a calm procession. Night had begun, and it was gentle. Behind her, the candles glowed like distant islands. They did not ask for anything. They gave. Silver, quiet, peaceful, dream. The meadow sighed and settled, as if tucking itself in. The candle witch did not look back. She did not need to. She knew the hollow was held, softly, by the light she had gathered and the love she always left behind. The path home curved through beeches and fern. The candle witch walked slowly. Her basket rested on her hip. The night breathed around her in soft, even waves. Silver light sifted through leaves. A small wind moved like a lullaby between branches and stones. Everything in the hollow felt calm. Everything felt quiet and kind. Her cottage waited where the trees opened. It was a low house of river stone. Vines climbed the walls in gentle spirals. Moonflower trumpets glowed along the eaves, white and peaceful, each petal edged with silver. The door was wooden and smooth under her palm. The latch clicked like a soft bell. She stepped inside, carrying the hollow with her. The cottage smelled of beeswax and pressed herbs, mint, chamomile, a hint of lavender, sweet and restful. Shelves lined the walls from floor to rafters. They were crowded with unlit candles, simple and honest, in every quiet shape. Tall tapers, round pillars, little tea lights like sleeping seeds. None burned with flame. They waited. They trusted. They were patient the way stones are patient, the way water is patient. She set her basket on the long table by the window. The table was scarred by years of kind work. There were shallow grooves where wicks had been trimmed. There were rings left by jars, set down with wet hands. She lifted the linen and smiled at the soft glow from the moon jars. The glass hummed with gentle light, not a sound exactly, a feeling, a low silver tone you hear with the heart. Outside, the stream by the cottage wall sang its night song. It slipped past roots and pebbles, and the pebbles gleamed like tiny stars under the surface. The water made slow patterns on the ceiling as it caught the moon. The patterns swayed as if they also breathed. In, out, in, out. A rhythm for sleep, a rhythm for peace. The candle witch moved with that rhythm. She poured water from a clay pitcher into a kettle and set it upon the iron ring above the hearth. No fire flamed there. A lantern of moonlight, kept from the night before, sat in the hearth niche. Its silver glow warmed the kettle in a calm, steady way, like the sun filtered through a cloud. The metal sang a small, sweet note as it warmed. She took a pinch of lavender from a crock and let the buds fall into a cup. They made a tiny rain. The scent rose, calm, gentle, quiet. She turned to the shelves and touched the waiting candles one by one. Each touch was a greeting. Hello, little light. Hello, quiet friend. She ran her finger along the trimmed wicks. She checked the smoothness of the wax. She listened for the stillness inside each shape. The stillness was there. The stillness was ready. A moth fluttered at the window pane. Its wings looked like soft leaves cut from moonlight. She unlatched the window. The moth came in and circled her head, unafraid, dreamy, slow. The night air came in as well. It carried the clean scent of wet stone and the faint music of crickets. The candle shelves seemed to listen. The room felt like a held breath, peaceful and whole. She chose one taper from the nearest shelf. It was narrow and pale and smelled like honey when warmed in the hands. She chose it not because it was special, but because it was waiting, and she was ready. She placed it in a small clay holder. She uncorked the first jar of moonlight. The silver inside moved like milk poured very slowly. She tilted the jar, just a little. A single drop touched the wick. Light flowered, not a flame, a bloom, a soft, silver bloom, like a petal unfolding in slow motion, like a secret opening into a smile. It did not push, it did not shout, it leaned, it offered, it eased. The room changed, but not much. Only the way a room changes when someone you love steps in and says your name. The plaster walls turned gentle, the table became friendly. The kettle's small song found harmony. She watched the light for a long breath, and then another. The taper held its quiet, like a bowl holds cool water. The moth settled near it, wings folding into a perfect soft heart. The witch set the jar back on the table and closed the cork. She stood with her hands on the wood, feeling the calm go out into the cottage, the way ripples go out from a pebble dropped in a pond. The ripples reached the door. They reached the roof. They reached the vines and the moonflowers at the eaves. It was enough to make everything sigh. She lit a second candle, then a third. She placed them in small places that needed kindness. One on the windowsill above the stream, one on the low shelf near the bed, one by the basin where she washed her hands in the morning. Each light did the same gentle work. It gathered the quiet. It gave it back. It made the shadows soft and thoughtful, not heavy. The broom in the corner looked like a friend resting after a helpful day. The chair by the window seemed to invite a book and a blanket and a slow hour of peace. She poured the water onto the lavender and waited while the tiny flowers turned the water sweet. She sat by the window and sipped the tea. The cup warmed her hands. The tea soothed her throat. Her breath matched the stream's breath. In, out, in, out. The moon climbed a little higher. Stars brightened in kind reply. Sometimes, when the cottage filled with this soft, silver light, the hollow listened. Sometimes, the hollow answered. The candle witch heard the answer now, as a murmur just beyond the wall, as a feeling just below the skin, a gentle shuffle in the grass, a slow step, a pause. She smiled and opened the door. At the threshold, Night stooped and looked in. Not a person, not a shape, a presence. Owls in the birches, a fox along the hedge, a ring of sleepy rabbits in the nettle shade. They did not cross. They did not need to. The moonlit glow from the shelves reached them where they stood and lay. Heads lowered, eyes softened, ears rested. The animals drank the quiet as if it were water. The witch whispered a greeting that was also a thank you. She took a small wreath of dried meadow flowers from a peg and hung it on the door latch. The flowers had kept their pale colors: cream, dusty blue, softest yellow. A ribbon of river grass wrapped them. The wreath was a sign, not for warning, but for welcome. It said, "Here is a place that loves sleep. Here is a place that keeps peace." She came back in and tied her hair with a strip of linen. She touched the shelves again. She thought of those who wandered late along the edge of the hollow, villagers who stood on their stoops and gazed toward the dim green line of trees with tired eyes. She thought of their hands, of the work they carried, of the thoughts that sometimes tangle and pull against rest. She let that thought soften. She let it sink into the candles, the way rain sinks into thirsty soil. "Be easy," she said, though no one was there to hear. "Be gentle, be soft." The words were quiet. The words were simple. The room took them in and made them part of the light. A breeze came along the floor, sweet and cool. It touched the taper by the basin, and the flame that was not flame leaned and returned, untroubled. The breeze smelled of mint from the water, stone from the bank, and a whisper of pine from the ridge. It rattled the chimes hanging under the eave's 5 river shells, smooth and pale. The shells sang a thin silver music. The candles answered with a steady glow. She wrote a small note in her ledger before sleep. The ledger was plain, bound in thread, moon gathered, 4 jars, candles trimmed, 20, lavender used, a pinch, wind, restful, stream, peaceful, stars, many. She liked to write these things, not to count, but to honor. Writing made the quiet visible. Writing kept the night steady. Before she put the ledger away, she drew a simple star beside the date. It was her private sign for a good evening. She blew across the ink to dry it, though it hardly needed drying. She closed the book and placed it under the taper by the bed. She washed her hands in the basin. The water shimmered. Light from the window, light from the shelf. Drops fell back, sounding like soft bells. She dried her fingers on a linen cloth and smoothed the cloth on its peg. She laid a thin blanket across the chair by the window so it would remember warmth for morning. She lifted 1 jar of moonlight and carried it to the bedside table. Not to pour, to keep near, to hold the hush beside her resting heart. Outside, the animals drifted away to their own beds of leaf and grass. The streams sang quieter, as if the night had learned the next verse, and that verse was softer. The cottage held its gentle light without effort. Nothing strained, nothing asked too much. The room, the shelves, the sleeping candles, the jars all breathed. The candle witch stood in the doorway once more and looked out across the hollow. Her windows shone like calm eyes. The glow carried along the path. It reached the first trees. It reached the surface of the stream and lay there like a silver scarf. Somewhere beyond the rise, a late wanderer paused and felt the pull of rest, the easy promise of quiet dreams. The witch did not see them, but she felt the easing. She nodded once, pleased. She closed the door. She set the latch. She pressed her palm to the wood in a small, grateful touch. Then she turned, crossed the soft floor, and sat on the bed with a slow breath. The taper by the shelf kept its steady bloom. The jar by the pillow kept its gentle hum. The room sighed, the night sighed, the hollow sighed. Within that silver peace, the candle witch leaned back and let her eyes do what they wished to do. They closed, gently. The cottage held her. The light held the cottage. The hollow held the light. Everything rested, quiet and kind, as moonlight smoothed the stones and the stream and the sleeping shelves until they all seemed made of one soft, peaceful dream. Dawn came in quiet layers and then stepped back, leaving the hollow in a soft, silver morning that felt almost like night. The candle witch woke with calm eyes and an easy breath. She listened to the stream at her wall, to the kettle's patient stillness, to the gentle hush held in the jars by her bed. The cottage glowed with leftover moon. It was a mild glow, like memory, like a dream that lingers kindly after sleep. She rose and washed her hands in cool water. The drops shone like tiny pearls, then fell, chiming softly on the bowl. She tied her hair, smoothed her linen dress, and chose a shawl as light as a cloud. On the table, the ledger waited. She opened it and wrote a small line, steady and plain. To the river with gentle candles, she drew another star, a promise to the day. Then she closed the book and gathered what the river asked for. Tapers wrapped in beeswax paper, a handful of small, round candles in shallow cups, and 3 jars of moonlight resting in a wicker cradle. She added a coil of flax cord, a little brush, and a tin of honey salve for hands that might grow dry in breeze. Outside, Silent Hollow breathed. The grasses were bright with dew. Each blade cradled a silver bead, that made the morning feel blessed. Sunlight was pale and quiet, filtered through high mist that softened edges and kept the world gentle. Birds called in low phrases, unhurried and mild. A pair of doves moved like soft thoughts from branch to branch. The stream wrote its calm story in the same patient hand it had used for years. She followed the water's narrow path as it left the cottage wall. It curved through fern and alder, then slid between willow roots that held the bank like careful fingers. The surface looked like brushed silk. Sometimes it made a small mirror, and above that mirror the sky set clouds like white petals. Sometimes it broke into little lines of light where stones lifted to greet it. The candle witch walked beside it and felt every change like a change in breath. At the first shallow bend, where the stream widened into a bright ribbon only ankle deep, she stopped. Here, the river was young enough to play, old enough to remember. Here, ripples carried a gentle echo and returned it softer than before, as if water loved to repeat peace. She set down her basket, knelt, and pressed her palm to the bank. The earth was cool and kind. "Good morning," she said to the stream. "I have brought light that does not burn and rest that does not end too soon." A dragonfly steadied itself on a reed and looked at her with glassy eyes that held 1,000 tiny moons. A trout ghosted in and out beneath the shallow, a faint shadow that made no trouble and left no trace. The witch uncorked the first jar. Moonlight woke inside it, silver and slow. She poured a thread of that light across a taper's wick. The glow opened like a quiet flower. No flame rose, no smoke lifted, only a soft bloom, cool as the inside of a shell, steady as a blessing. She set the taper in a small wooden saucer lined with beeswax. The saucer would float without tipping. She touched the rim with flax cord and tied it to a willow twig, leaving a gentle length for drifting. Then, with 2 fingers and a breath that matched the river's breath, in, out, she placed the floating candle on the surface. The water accepted the gift the way a calm hand accepts another calm hand. The round of wood rocked once, then found its balance. The silver light moved with the stream and made a pale path that pointed nowhere in a hurry and everywhere without strain. The witch watched the first wide ring of brightness widen and soften, a hush upon a hush. She poured moonlight onto a second wick, a third, then a cluster of little cups that would drift like slow stars. Each time the glow opened, the day felt quieter, even though day was already quiet. She set the little stars upon the water in a gentle line, like beads on a soft thread. She secured some to willow twigs, let others go free to wander as they wished, but not far, for the bend would gather them. The stream gathered everything kind. The echoes began, not loud echoes, gentle ones. The sound of water on wood returned as a softer sound. The sigh of reeds returned as a softer sigh. Even her breath came back to her. She breathed. The river breathed back until she felt that she and the river were using the same simple lungs. The candle's silver hum folded into that rhythm. It was not music with notes. It was the kind of music trees understand. A wren hopped along the stones near her knee, watching the lights as though they were seeds. It tilted its head, closed one eye, then both, as if even a bright little heart can enjoy rest for a breath. Across the water, a hare lifted from the grass, ears calm, nose still, and looked without worry. The drifting cups touched in slow greetings and parted in slow farewells. Nothing hurried. Nothing asked to be more than itself. The candle witch brushed a speck of moss from a saucer's rim and listened to the river tell an old story of smooth stones and long patience. She remembered a winter when ice had covered this bend in frosted lace. She remembered a summer when swallows had stitched the air with threads of wing. She remembered nights when the moon was so close, it seemed the water might rise to kiss it. Every season had left a peaceful trace, and the river kept them all, mixed together like gentle tea. She dipped her fingers in. The water was cool and sweet. She cupped a little and let it slip back, thin silver ribbons running through silver light. The echoes answered soft, softer, softest, until even the smallest ripple sounded like a blessing, said once and again and again, each time lighter, each time kinder, each time more ready to be sleep. Downstream, the bend opened into a tiny meadow where buttercups lifted quiet cups to the day. The floating candles moved in that direction, and the witch walked alongside, keeping pace with their patient drift. She adjusted a cord when it brushed a root, freed one cup from a tuck of grass, set another closer to the center where the current would cradle it. She tended without fuss, as one tends a child's blanket in the night, smooth and small, so that dreams can knit themselves without a snag. She paused at a place where the bank rose in a neat green wall. The river there made a low, lasting sound, like a held note from a kind bell. She added 2 fresh tapers to the water and watched them join the others, their glows weaving and unweaving like soft lace. The echoes deepened, not louder, only richer, like a chorus that knows how to whisper together. A pair of village children came to the far edge of the meadow, holding hands, bare feet in the grass. They did not call. They did not ask for anything. They stood and watched. The silver lights on the water rested on their faces and smoothed their brows. One child leaned against the other, and the other smiled without a word. The witch lifted her hand in a small wave. The children lifted theirs in return, then sat in the buttercups and listened with their whole small bodies. Listening is a kind of sleep that happens before sleep. She uncorked the second jar. Moonlight flowed, and a new candle bloomed. She thought of the village windows at noon, curtains stirring, bread cooling, cats on warm ledges. She thought of evening, when work grows quiet, and thoughts need help to grow quiet too. "Here is your help," she whispered, not to the children only, but to all the windows and all the ledges and all the gentle hands that knead dough and lift cups and smooth quilts. The river caught her whisper and sent it on in silver syllables that the reeds repeated and the stones remembered. The day lifted a little. The mist thinned. Pale sun reached the bend, but the moonlit cups did not shy away. Sun and moon shared the water as if they were 2 quiet friends at a small table. Where the light crossed, minnows twined like tiny silver threads, stitching brightness to brightness. The echoes softened yet again, as if even sound wished to sit down and rest its feet. High above, a heron took a long, slow step through the shallows. Its reflection walked with it, soft as breath. The bird paused beside a drifted cup and closed its eyes for the length of one calm heartbeat. Then it moved on, deeper into the silver. The witch smiled. The river smiled back. If a river can smile, perhaps by smoothing itself and shining and keeping small promises. When only a cup or 2 remained unlit, she opened the 3rd jar and saved half. She would keep a little for evening, for the cottage door, for the path that leads a late wanderer home. She tied the saved jar in her basket and set the 2 last cups upon the water. Now the bend held a drifting garden of soft stars, a quiet, moving meadow made of glow. The children on the far bank lay back and looked at the sky, where thin clouds moved like slow sails. Their eyelids grew heavy in the mild noon, Even a day can nap. The candle witch sat on a root and let the calm come and come again. Gentle, soft, peaceful, silver, quiet. The words repeated, and each time they felt truer, as if they were the river's own words, as if the river had always been saying them and she had only just learned to hear. The echoes carried those words around the bend and down the little meadow and into the narrow where the stream slipped under hawthorn shade. There, the hawthorn tucked the words into blossoms so the bees could take them from flower to flower and the village could taste them in honey. At last, when the sun had shifted and the candles had drifted and the echoes had done their tender work, she rose. She checked every chord. She guided every free cup into an easy course where no reed would trouble it and no stone would frown. The river agreed to watch them now, to shepherd them around the bend, to carry their quiet as far as a quiet is needed. She pressed her palm to the water in farewell, and the water pressed back, cool and kind. "Rest well," she said to the river. "Rest well," the river said, or seemed to say, in the tongue of ripples. She lifted her basket and turned toward the path, light-footed, as if she had left her burdens on the current, and the current had dissolved them into silver. On her way home, the air smelled of warm grass and sweet mud and a shy hint of mint. A lark rose and fell, like a long, slow breath made of feather and sky. When she reached the cottage, the stream at the wall seemed to hum with more peace than before, as if the bend had sent its echoes upstream in gratitude. She set the saved jar on the table and wrote another line in the ledger. River tended, candles drifted, echoes gentle, children smiling. Then she drew her smallest star, a quiet one, no need for more, because the day had done what days are born to do when they are kind. Far behind her, the cups kept moving, soft and silver, a floating lullaby for reeds and fish and roots and stones. Their light did not fade. It settled. It learned the river's shape. It became part of the calm that the hollow wears like a beloved shawl. And all along the banks, all through the grass, the echoes continued to return, gentler each time, until evening would come and carry them into dream. Evening walked softly down the slopes, carrying cool shadows like folded shawls. The candle witch set a kettle near her moonlit lantern and laid sprigs of lavender and mint upon a small plate. The cottage windows breathed a gentle glow. Outside, the vines held their white trumpets to the dusk, and the stream at the wall smoothed its voice into a low, peaceful hum. The hollow waited with her, kind and quiet, as footsteps found the path from the village. They came without hurry. A baker with flour still soft on her sleeves, an old carpenter whose hands remembered every curve of wood he had ever shaped, a young mother, light-eyed and tired, carrying a small shawl folded like a cloud, two brothers who spoke little but laughed easily, those laughs now tucked away, a little shy, a little worn. Behind them, a teacher, a shopkeeper, a weaver with silver thread in her hair. The evening gathered them, and the path guided them gently, gently to the door. The candle witch opened it before they knocked. Her smile was a small light of its own. "Welcome," she said in a voice as calm as water in a cupped hand. "Come where it is quiet. Come where the night is gentle." They stepped in and breathed the balm of beeswax and herbs, of mint and honey and warm wood. Fear had no room here. Worry loosened its grip, finger by finger, and sat down to rest. She poured hot water over lavender buds. The steam lifted like a pale blessing and curled toward the rafters where swallows had nested last spring. She added a ribbon of honey, slow and golden, and stirred until sweetness vanished into warmth. Cups waited on a tray of smooth ash. The baker held one with both hands and watched the silver reflections of the moonlit lantern move across the tea, calm little waves that said, again and again, soft, soft, soft. Sit where the light is kind, the witch murmured, and placed 3 tapers along the windowsill. She did not strike flint. She did not lift flame. She uncorked a moon jar, the same jar she had saved at the river, and let a slender thread of silver fall. One wick bloomed, another, another. The glow touched the faces of her visitors and softened the lines that long days can draw. The room changed slightly, like a sigh becoming a deeper sigh, like a thought remembering how to be quiet. The old carpenter set his hat on his knee. He listened to the stream. "My work is good," he said gently. "But sometimes my hands keep working in my sleep." The candle witch nodded, as if this were a story the hollow itself had told her. She reached for a small, round candle and held it near the jar's mouth until moonlight found the wick. The little candle opened its silver. She placed it in the carpenter's palm, cool and light, a moon seed. "Let this rest with your tools tonight," she said. "Let it teach your hands to sleep." The young mother cradled the folded shawl. Her eyes were clear, but their edges were tired. "My child dreams too brightly," she whispered. "The dreams are not frightening, only busy. So many colors, so many little songs. His breath runs after them." The candle witch smiled, and her smile was a hush. She poured tea for the mother, then lit a small taper and a smaller one, yet no taller than a thumb. "This one for your room," she said softly. "This littlest one for his. Light them at the window where the wind can learn to be gentle before it crosses the sill." The 2 brothers stood together, shoulders touching, as if their rest belonged to both of them and should not be divided. "We do not know what to ask," said one, and the other nodded, relieved to say nothing at all. The witch moved to the shelf and chose 2 candles shaped like pebbles from the river, smooth and round. She touched them with the jar's silver until they glowed like quiet stones underwater. "Take these to the hill above your home," she told them. "Set them in the grass. Watch the town lights below. Let the wind pass over your thoughts and leave them as it leaves grass bent a little, then rising, then calm." The weaver with silver hair loosened the scarf at her throat and smiled at the moths that rested, soft as leaves, near the lantern. "I have woven all day," she said. "Threads in, threads out, threads crossing." She lifted her empty hands and found them lighter than she expected. "But there is one thread that will not lie smooth. It pulls at my thinking." The candle witch brought a pillar candle, the color of cream. She cupped the jar over the wick. The pillar bloomed with a slow, steady heart. "Place this by your loom," she whispered, "and think of the river's bend. Even a pulling thread can learn the river's round." They drank tea. They breathed. They sat in the simple chairs, the kind that ask nothing, but offer kindly, and looked at the plain shelves, the wool blanket folded over the window seat, the reed mat by the door, where the stream sometimes left a blessing of damp cool. Conversation sank into the quiet, the way stones sink through still water, small circles widening, each one softer than the last. Nothing needed to be solved. The moon did most of the talking, and it spoke in silver. From time to time, the candle witch lifted the jar and lit another waiting wick. She placed gentle lights in gentle places, not to brighten, only to soften. One near the ledger so the day's small goodness could be written without haste. one on the mantel where the shells chimed faintly when Breeze remembered them, one on the floor beside the basket of mending to bless the humble work of needles and thread. The room became a choir of quiet candles, the kind that never burn, the kind that hold, the kind that give. The baker sighed. The sound was a warm loaf, cooling. "I wake early," she said. "I sleep early too, but in the middle dark, my mind walks into the ovens and counts the trays again and again." She raised her tea, inhaled the soft, honeyed scent, then set the cup down as if it were something precious. The witch took a taper, lit it with moonlight, and touched the baker's sleeve with 2 fingers, leaving nothing there but calm. "Set this by the flower," she said. "Let the flower remember winter fields. Let the fields remember snow. Let snow remember silence. Sleep will remember you." The teacher, who had listened as teachers do, with quiet that makes room for others, cleared his throat and smiled. "I will carry no candle tonight," he said. "My home is full of books, and the pages breathe enough light for me." He looked up at the rafters, as if checking the truth of his words against the silence. "But may I bring a small light to my classroom? Not to burn, only to rest upon the shelf where the children's questions flutter and rarely land." The candle witch's eyes warmed. She chose a tea light in a shallow cup and filled it slowly. "Place it beside the questions," she replied. "Let the questions see their own soft wings. They will land when they are ready." When cups were empty, she refilled them with warm water alone, so that the steam might smooth foreheads and eyelids and leave no weight behind. She wrapped small bundles, lavender heads, mint leaves, a pinch of chamomile for those who wanted to steep a second quiet once they returned home. She wrote a few words in the ledger. Visitors welcomed, candles offered, tea gentle, faces easy, stars listening. Then she drew a tiny star, no bigger than a seed, and smiled at its smallness. One by one, the villagers rose. They took their light with both hands, as one lifts a sleeping kitten, careful and glad. The witch showed them how to carry the moonlit glow close to the heart, level, patient. "Do not hurry," she said. "The night is not going anywhere. Let the path do the walking." At the door, she touched each shoulder in blessing, no more than the weight of a moth's wing, and the stream's song seemed to braid itself with her soft goodnights. They stepped out. The hollow received them. The path lay pale and easy. Crickets played their small, silver instruments. The candles in the villagers' hands did not flare. They quieted. Their light fell on shoes and grass and stones in tender ovals, like little ponds of peace. The 2 brothers paused at the gate, exchanged a look, and laughed the laugh they had kept, only softer. The young mother lifted the tiny candle and held it near the shawl. The shawl seemed to warm itself and remember the shape of a small sleeping back. The carpenter flexed his fingers, then let them soften and hang. The candle witch watched until their shapes were part of the evening. She did not follow with her eyes past the birches. She did not need to. The hollow would finish the work, carrying gentle light to thresholds, to ladders, to looms, to ovens, to beds. She closed the door, set the latch, and stood with her palm against the wood in a quiet thank you to the night and to the feet that had trusted her path. She tidied without making a sound, cups rinsed in cool water, set upside down, and left to dry in a silver line. Herbs returned to their crocks. The kettle moved a little aside to rest. She pinched the moon jar closed and stroked the glass as if it were a calm animal. On the windowsill, the 3 tapers still bloomed. She left them there for a while longer so the wind could learn, so the vines could listen, so the stream could carry the softness farther along its patient road. When at last she sat, the cottage seemed to breathe around her. The moths folded themselves into the stillness. The shells at the eaves were quiet. The ledger's thread-bound spine lay peaceful on the table. She placed one more small candle near the door, a gentle watch for late travelers. Then she whispered into the light what she had whispered at the river, and on many evenings before: sleep gently, dream softly, rest deeply. The words walked out through the latch and down the path and into the village, where windows glowed and curtains stirred, and the first slow dreams began to settle like silver snowfall, quiet and kind. Night drifted in on quiet feet, soft as mist crossing a bowl of water. The candle witch listened from her doorway. She heard the stream hum to stones. She heard reeds give their slow silver sigh. Yet over the hollow there came another sound, thin, fluttering, tender but restless. Wings, many wings. A meadow farther up the slope whispered with feathers that would not fold. She took her shawl, light as fog, and a basket lined with soft linen. Inside, she set a coil of flax cord, a small brush, a pouch of dried petals for comfort, and 4 moon jars, one deep and full, one half filled from the river saving, 2 small ones holding the hush of patient evenings. She added a cluster of candles shaped like little bells and little shells, as if they belonged among flowers and river stones. She stepped into the silver air and closed the door with a touch that felt like blessing. The path to the meadow wound through a stand of birch, where the white trunks gleamed like tall, sleeping candles of their own. The ground was springy, moss threaded with starry stitchwort. She walked slowly, careful not to wake more of the night than needed. The sky above her was a deep, quiet bowl, stars set like calm seeds. The moon, high and kind, looked over the ridge with a mother's patience. As she came near, the meadow announced itself with the soft rush of wings and the small sound of worry in the grass. Birds, dozens, perhaps more, shifted from tuft to tuft, wide-eyed, bright-eyed, not frightened, only awake, too awake, awake beyond comfort. They lifted and settled and lifted again, the air stirring with gentle confusion. Some were larks and pipits, some thrushes, a few slender swallows late to roost from the river, their long tails tracing anxious commas on the night. The candle witch stood at the edge and listened. She let the meadow speak. She felt the wind move over the hill and across the birds, quickening them. She felt the day's warmth still hiding in the earth, rising in small breaths that kept feathers alert. She tasted thyme and clover and the sweet, sharp ghost of sun on dry grass. A fox at the far hedge paused, respectful, then turned away, understanding this was not a night for hunting but for healing. Peace, she said, very softly, to grass and wind and wing. Gentle, soft, quiet, dream. The meadow heard her. It shifted, not yet calm, but listening. She set her basket on a flat stone and lifted the deepest jar. Inside, moonlight waited like cool milk, like a lullaby still unspoken. She placed a ring of little bell candles among the meadow flowers, between harebells and bedstraw, among feathery yarrow, beside small domes of clover. She left space for feet, for roots, for mice who might want to pass without trouble. Then she uncorked the jar and let the silver flow. Each wick bloomed, not with flame, but with a hush, a petal of light, a soft, silver cup turned upward to catch sleep. 1 glow, then 3, then 10. She moved in widening circles, hands steady, breath slow, as if she were stitching a quilt whose pieces were breeze and scent and starlight. The candles did not ask the dark to leave. They taught it how to rest. The first swallow felt the change. It circled once, twice, then drew a gentle line across the light and settled on a stalk of tansy. Its wings drooped, its eyes softened to dusky pearls. A thrush tilted its head, listening to the hush as if it were a low, kind song. Larks, with their bright, untiring hearts, hopped closer to the silver, then closer still, choosing places where stems made cradles. The fluttering thinned. The air grew rounder, the way a bowl grows rounder when water stops moving and remembers its shape. The candle witch crouched. She brushed her small brush over a leaf to shake off a bead of dew into the soil, so the drop would not chill a folded wing. She tucked a long thread of grass back from a cluster of feathers. With 2 fingers, she lifted a spent thistle down from the ground and laid it aside so no tiny foot would carry it into a nest. She worked as the hollow worked, without haste, without fuss, with deep attention that felt like love. A breeze came wandering from the ridge, curious and quick. It touched the birds and made them stir again. The witch rose, walked to the hill's crest, and set 3 taller candles where the wind first arrived. She opened the half-filled jar and fed each wick with a slow sip of moon. The glow reached the air before the air reached the meadow. The breeze felt it, learned it, slowed. It became a breath, and then a slower breath, like the breath of an old pine resting after years of standing. The wind was not told to stop. It was invited to be peaceful. Feathers quieted. The rush of wings softened to a small, occasional rustle. Here and there, a bird still paced, not ready, not yet, until the witch bent and placed a tiny shell candle in the shade of a plantain leaf, very near the little wanderer. Silver touched the bird's bright eye. Curiosity gave way to calm. It turned once, tucked its head under a wing, and let the night hold it. She opened the 3rd jar, one of the small ones, and lit a chain of tea lights along the little path that mice used between 2 pockets of clover. She did not want them startled. She wanted all soft feet to move in soft safety. The mice came, whiskers like fine threads, eyes like wet seeds, and they paused, then passed with quiet delight, their shadows rounding over the shallow cups like tiny clouds. Above, the moon moved another finger's width toward the west. The stars deepened. The meadow's colors merged into gentle shades: silver, gray-green, blue soft, cream soft. The bell candles made low constellations in the grass, a sky beneath the sky. The candle witch breathed the scent of night flowers and honeyed clover and the far sweetness of ripe apples in an unseen orchard. She thought of small hearts slowing. She thought of small wings warming. She thought of the way sleep is a kindness shared between body and world. At the far edge, a young skylark kept lifting and landing, as if it had forgotten where songs end and rest begins. The witch walked slowly toward it, letting her steps press the memory of calm into the ground. She took from her pouch a few dried petals, lavender, borage, chamomile, and rubbed them gently between finger and thumb. Their fragrance rose, a tender ghost. She touched a wick in a flower-shaped candle with the smallest jar's light. The glow gathered the scent and made it softer still. She set the candle a hand span from the bird and crouched, palms on the earth. "It is good to sleep," she whispered. "Even songs sleep." The skylark shivered once, then tucked its beak into the white of its shoulder and rested, like a note laid carefully on a quiet page. The meadow now looked like a cradle, and the sky like a hand. The restless sound had changed to the sound of settling, the easy shift of feathers, the gentle, once only stir of grass under weight, finding its nest. Where anxious wings had beaten, a hush pooled, cool and deep. The hollow itself seemed to draw closer, as if it wished to watch over this soft gathering of small dreams. A pair of owls came from the birches and perched in the hawthorn. They were still as thought. Their eyes were lamps of understanding. They looked across the meadow at silver placed among flowers and at birds wrapped in moonlight calm. The owls blinked, slow and solemn, as if to say, "The night learns from you, and we from the night." Then they faced the fields and kept their own steady watch, guardians in quiet agreement. The candle witch checked every ring of light. She straightened a bell candle that had leaned. She smoothed a little bowl of grass where a thrush had chosen its bed. She retied one flax cord so a cluster would not shift against a tender wing. Her hands worked as waterworks, making paths, making ease, leaving the faintest gloss of blessing behind. Gentle, soft, peaceful, silver, quiet. The words beat like a slow, kind pulse in her wrists. When all was set, she stood at the meadow's center and looked around. The restless birds were no longer restless. They were part of the night, folded into it the way petals fold into a blossom when evening asks. She lifted her face to the moon and closed her eyes a moment, feeling the steady silver above, the steady silver below, and the great, quiet bowl of the hollow carrying both. She uncorked the last jar, a small one with just a little left, and poured a single drop onto the grass at her feet. A thank you to the earth, a thank you to the wind that had learned to rest, a thank you to the birds for trusting sleep. The drop sank and shone for a breath, then became part of the dark, which was not empty but full of soft seeds of dream. On her way out, she set 3 low candles by the gate, so any late wings would see and settle. The fox, waiting politely beyond the hedge, met her eyes and dipped its fine head, then slipped away into shadow with steps that made no sound. The witch felt the meadow at her back like a slow, sweet tide. She felt the stream calling in its quiet voice, and the path answering with stones that knew the shape of her feet. At the cottage door, she paused and looked up the slope. The meadow glimmered faintly, like dew that had decided to become light. No fluttering rose, only the soft breath of many small chests rising and falling in time with the night. She set one calm taper inside her window and let its silver speak across the grass. "Sleep gently," she whispered to the meadow. "Dream softly." The words drifted up, delicate and sure, and settled like silk over every folded wing. Morning moved like a quiet hand across the hollow, smoothing every blade of grass. The candle witch woke to the soft rustle of vines at her window and the calm song of the stream. She rose slowly, letting her breath find the small, even rhythm that kept the day kind. The cottage held its silver hush. The shelves waited. The jars glowed faintly, like shells remembering the tide. She lit a tiny taper with moonlight and set it beside the ledger. Its glow was simple and true. She wrote a single line, "To the old tree with gentle light." Then she tied her hair with a linen ribbon and gathered what the day had asked for: a bundle of small candles, pale as milk, 3 low pillars, smooth as river stones, a coil of soft cord, a little wooden ladder for roots too wide to step across, 2 jars of moonlight, one nearly full, one half filled and patient, a pocket tin of honey salve, a brush to sweep leaves from cool places. She stepped outside. The hollow breathed. Dew shone on grasses like a scattered sky. bees worked the white trumpets on the eaves. Swallows stitched long, easy lines in the bright air. The path to the old tree began beyond the willow bend and climbed in gentle folds. She walked there with unhurried feet, basket at her side, shawl light on her shoulders. The meadow of last night slept well. Birds rested deep in the green. Her heart rested too. Past the willows, the land widened and lifted. A knoll rose at the valley's quiet center. At its crown stood the tree, ancient, generous, holding. Its bark was dark and patient. Its branches curved the way rivers curve. Its leaves were many and mild, green pages that turned in the softest wind. Around it lay a ring of roots, like sleeping deer, smooth-backed and kind. The candle witch paused at the foot of the knoll. She put her palm to the ground and greeted the earth. "Good morning," she whispered. "I have brought gentle light for gentle work." The hill answered with warmth under her hand. The grass answered with sweetness under her breath. A robin at the root ring looked up and approved with one small note. She climbed the slope and stood beneath the first low bough. The shade there was cool, scented with leaf and loam and the faint spice of old rain. She set down her basket and touched the trunk. The bark felt steady. It felt like time made kind. She leaned her forehead to it for a heartbeat, then another. A hum lived within soft, low, level, as if the tree spoke in slow chords. Only the hollow understood. In the notches of the bark, in the folds between roots, she found small things people leave when they wish, but cannot carry the wish home. A ribbon, pale with years, a button, a sea pebble from someone who missed the shore, a folded scrap of linen with a faded word caught in its threads. These were quiet offerings, not loud petitions. They had become part of the tree's deep listening. She took up her brush and swept leaves from the cool hollows between roots. She placed the button on a clean patch of bark where it could shine like a tiny moon. She laid the sea pebble in a small nest of moss. She lifted the linen scrap and touched it to her cheek, then set it under a shelf of wood where dew could bless it and not wash it away. She moved slowly. She listened more than she placed. The first candle she set at the eastern root, where morning rested its hand. She uncorked the fuller jar just a little and tipped a drop onto the wick. The candle opened with a silver heart. No flame rose, no smoke, only a quiet, living glow, cool as river light on a stone. The second candle went at the southern root, where summer warmth lingers, even in spring. The third at the west, where evenings kneel. The fourth at the north, where winter keeps its wise calm. She made a gentle circle, a compass of rest. Then she placed the low pillars in the root ring's center, where soil collected the tree's old songs. Each pillar accepted slow moonlight and answered with a deeper tone, a glow like a held breath. The tree's inner hum changed, not louder, rounder, as if memory had found a softer chair. Wind came up the knoll and walked under the branches. It touched the silver and learned to move. As the silver moved steady, even, kind, leaves murmured. The murmur was a choir of yes. A squirrel appeared on a forked bough and rested its head on its small hands, listening. A hare in the grass at the edge tucked its feet beneath and closed its eyes as if it were sitting in a pew made of shade. The candle witch knew the tree by many seasons. In spring, it held green wishes, new work, tender vows, promises folded like buds. In summer, it kept bright wishes, laughter, harvest, days that linger. In autumn, it cupped warm wishes, safe homes, shared loaves, hands around cups. In winter, it guarded quiet wishes, candles in windows, breath that fogs and then clears, patience while the dark finishes its old stories. And then there were the forgotten wishes, the ones people laid down because they felt too light to keep, or too heavy, or simply slipped between the day's fingers and were lost. The tree remembered those. She uncorked the half-filled jar and held it near the trunk. "For the forgotten," she said, so softly that even the wind bowed to hear. She poured a slow ribbon of moonlight down the bark. The silver ran in fine threads along the furrows, gathered in hollows, shone like water on old wood. Where it touched those small offerings, the ribbon, the button, the pebble, the linen, each lifted as if answering a name. The hum within the trunk deepened. It was not a sound of sorrow. It was a sound of remembering without ache. It was the sound a heart makes when it forgives itself for being human. Leaves trembled and stilled. Shadows settled like quiet animals around the root ring. The witch lit 3 more small candles and tucked them into a crevice where tiny ferns grew, their fronds delicate and green as first thoughts. The ferns received the light and lifted a little, pleased. From the village path below, 2 elders came, walking slow and easy, hands linked as if they were both a single staff. They paused at the foot of the knoll and tipped their heads to the tree, the way one might tip a hat to a beloved teacher. The candle witch raised her hand. They raised theirs. They did not climb. They sat in the grass and leaned on one another and let the tree do its gentle work from a distance. The tree was good at that. A child arrived next, alone and careful, carrying a small, chipped bowl. Inside lay a smooth stone painted long ago with a crooked star. The child stood at the edge of roots, unsure. The witch smiled and beckoned. The child came and placed the bowl where the sunlight fell, in a small square between leaves. "I wish to keep it bright," the child said, voice small, "but I forgot where I put it for a long time." The witch touched the bowl's rim. "Found is a kind of bright," she said. She lit a tiny tea light and set it beside the bowl. The painted star caught the silver. The child's eyes softened. "Thank you," they whispered, and sat by the northern root, hands folded, to listen. The hum grew stiller and deeper. It was a kind depth, like a pond that keeps stars in its evening skin. The candle witch reached for the fuller jar again and drew a finger of moonlight along a long scar in the bark, a place where lightning had once leaned close but chosen to be gentle. The scar gleamed and then quieted, part of things, not a part. She laid her cheek against the trunk again. Within, she felt movement slow and wide as a tide, not rising, not falling, holding. The holding itself was the healing. Birdsong came thin at first, a thread of gold in a silver room, then none at all, for this was not a time for singing. This was a time for wishes to turn into breath. The leaves stilled entirely. Even the bees, when they flew through the shade, hushed their wings a little and arced around the root ring as if the ground were a cradle. The witch opened the last of the small candles and placed them where roots arched like bridges. She set one by a hollow that looked like a cup. She set one by a knot that looked like an eye that had decided to close and rest. She set one on a flat place that looked like a table where someone might have once laid bread and a story. Each wick bloomed with soft silver. Each bloom made the hum rounder yet, and then the tree answered, not in words, in shining. A thin, luminous mist rose from the leaves as if the green released its collected moon. It lifted in slow veils, rose through the high branches, and drifted up into the blue. In the mist were shapes like seed, like letters, like the small curves of a child's first writing. Wishes remembered, wishes rewritten, wishes ready to belong to the sky. The elders below lifted their faces and breathed as if smelling rain. The child held the chipped bowl close and smiled without moving. The witch did not reach for the mist. She watched, she breathed, she let the silver climb. Stars were not yet visible, but the blue above accepted each gentle thread. When night would come, those threads would answer as faint brightness on the rim of a cloud, as the quiet sense that sometimes touches a window and makes a sleeper turn and release a long-held thought. The tree would keep some wishes, the small ones that liked to live near roots. It would return others, so the sky could carry them into dream. She corked the jars. She pressed honey salve across 2 small cracks where bark had opened from winter chill, working it in with soft circles that warmed the wood. She brushed crumbs of leaf from the hollow where the linen lay and tucked it deeper. She smoothed the earth where her knees had pressed, then lifted her basket and stood. "Thank you," she told the tree. The tree answered with the quiet that follows a blessing. The elders rose and bowed their heads to the branches. The child placed the bowl on their heart and whispered a promise the witch did not need to hear. Promises can be shy and still be true. She walked down the knoll and along the path. The air smelled of leaf, of moss, of sap, sweet as clean tea. The hollow felt wider in a gentle way, like a chest after a deep breath. At the willow bend, the stream winked in the Sunday. She paused there and wrote in her ledger, pencil against knee. Wishes remembered, roots peaceful, silver returned to sky. Then she drew a star with a longer tail, as if it were moving slowly from one kindness to another. When she reached the cottage, she set one small candle on the threshold. Its silver lay across the stones like a welcome. In the doorway, she turned and looked toward the knoll. The tree stood quiet, leaves steady, bark calm, roots easy. Above it, sky held a tenderness that daylight almost never shows. She felt it touch her brow, light as a moth's wing. "Sleep gently," she murmured for the wishes, for the ones who had left them, for the roots, for the leaves, for the far blue that would keep them all. Then she stepped inside, and the door took her whisper and carried it back to the hill, where it settled like soft dust on old bark and was heard. Evening folded itself along the ridges and settled into the hollow like a shawl. The stream sang lower. The birches stood pale and kind. The candle witch lit a taper on her table with a touch of moonlight and wrote a line in the ledger. "Walk the edge paths. Carry a small light." Her hand lingered. She drew a tiny star beside the words, and the star looked like a promise. She wrapped a crust of bread, a slice of soft cheese, and a pear that smelled of late Sunday. She tucked in a small jar of honey salve, a roll of linen, and the smallest candle from her shelf, a little lamp no wider than a seashell, poured in a humble cup. She lifted one moon jar, not full, but bright. She set them in her basket, tied a scarf over her hair, and opened the door to the quiet. The path along the outer hedge was pale and simple. Vines brushed her sleeve. Moths rose and fell like soft breathing. Owls settled into hawthorn and watched with slow, wise eyes. The wind learned to rest in the fields and moved like a sigh across clover and rye. Far off, a dog barked once, then remembered the hush and lay back down. The hollow felt gentle. The hollow felt good. She walked. She listened. Her steps found the small rhythm of evening. In, out, here, home. The stream sent a silver line through the dark grass and kept her company. At the far boundary, where the path bends toward the village, she heard a sound like a thought that could not finish. A thin sound, a tired sound, a child's sound, but quieter than crying. It was the sound of a small heart, tugged awake by too many bright pictures and too many small worries, as quick as minnows. The candle witch paused beneath a beech and looked toward the bend. There, at the meeting of two hedges, stood a child with their back against a stone. Their hands were folded in their sleeves. Their eyes were open and heavy at once. The child's foot made a small circle on the dust, round and round, like a moon tracing itself. She came closer without hurry. She let the quiet go ahead of her, the way water goes ahead of a boat and makes a place for it. "Good evening," she said, airy as a leaf. "This path is a kind path. It is good to meet you upon it." The child lifted their head. "I could not sleep," they said. The voice was tender and brave. "My dreams are too full. They are not bad dreams, only busy. They do not stop. When I close my eyes, they run, and I must run after them. Then my breath runs. Then my night runs away." The candle witch nodded. She set the basket down and sat on the grass, and the child slid down the stone to sit too. They looked at the stream together. They watched it say quiet things to small rocks and to roots and to the low, listening bank. After a while, she unwrapped the bread and the cheese and the pear. "Supper?" she asked. The child smiled a little. "A small supper," they agreed. They ate slowly, crust to teeth, cheese to tongue, pear to palm, juice to lip. Between bites, they watched the moths. Between sips of water, they watched the first star waking in the high blue. The child's shoulders softened a little. The circle on the dust was smaller now, and then it was nothing at all. From the basket, the witch took the littlest lamp. It was simple as a button. She uncorked the moon jar and let one drop of silver touch the tiny wick. The lamp bloomed with a soft, cool heart, not a flame, a petal, a restful petal. She set the lamp by the child's knee. The light leaned on their sleeve like a small, kind cat. "What are the dreams like?" she asked. "They are pictures that want to be more pictures," the child said. "Horses run and become rivers. Rivers run and become roads. Roads run and become ladders. Ladders climb and become stars. And then I am running up the stars and down the stars, and my breath is a bird that cannot find its branch." The candle witch listened. "Your dreams are bright," she said. "They are strong and lively. But even bright things can learn to be gentle. Even strong things can learn to rest." She lifted another cup from the basket, smaller than the first. "I will give you a small light for the path inside your eyes. The light will not chase the pictures. It will not catch them. It will show them where to fold." The child looked at the tiny lamp. They held their palm above it and felt the cool silver like a smooth stone from a stream. "Show them where to fold," they repeated. The words felt right in the mouth. They tasted like honey after bread. "Do your thoughts feel heavy?" the witch asked. And when the child nodded, she opened the salve and warmed a little between her hands. She touched the child's temples with clean fingers. The scent of beeswax and meadow herbs rose in a tender breath. "This is for the thinking muscles," she whispered. "They have worked hard today. They wish to be thanked. Then they will sleep." An owl turned its head and blinked very slowly. The stream moved one smooth pebble against another with a sound like a silver yes. The wind threaded its quiet through the hedge and tucked it there. "Will you walk with me as far as the bridge?" the witch asked. "Then I will walk with you as far as your gate. We will not hurry. We will let the path do the walking." She lifted the basket The child took the tiny lamp in both hands and stood, slightly surprised at how easy standing felt. They walked. The lamp made a round of silver on the path for 2 pairs of feet. Moss in the cracks of the stones looked like islands, and then looked like soft pillows, and then looked like nothing but moss. They passed a patch of wild thyme. The child reached their fingers into the green and brought them back to their nose and breathed the small, kind perfume. "This smells like a day with no chores," they said. "This smells like a nap in a warm spot on the floor." The witch smiled. "That is exactly what it smells like." At the bridge, the stream bowed under them and gave back the moon with gentle hands. The child paused to look down. The lamp's circle rested on the water and did not break. The water took it and made it round again and sent it along, slower than a leaf, surer than a leaf. The child exhaled a longer breath. The lamp's petal did not tremble. The petal was peace. "Sometimes," the witch said, "we do not need to push dreams away. We only need to move slower than they do. We only need to stand still and let them pass us, the way this water passes that stone." She touched the bridge's old edge. "We let them go first, then we follow only as far as a quiet place." They crossed the bridge. Glow worms had lit their small beads along a bank of nettle, as if the ground had learned a song from the sky and wanted to hum. The child laughed once, very softly, to see such tiny lamps doing such steady work. "They are small," they said, "but they are brave." The witch nodded. "Small brave is the best kind for sleep." They reached the village road. It was not loud. It was not busy. It was only itself dust and stone, hedge and gate, a few windows carrying lamplight as gently as bowls carry milk. At the 3rd gate, a cat rose from a step and stretched into the night as if it were a blanket. The witch touched the latch. "Is this home?" she asked. The child nodded. "Yes," they said, and the word was lighter than it had been when they first spoke. "My mother will be at the table. My father will be mending a chair. He mends chairs very slowly. That sound helps me sleep when it is quiet inside my head. But tonight, my head was not quiet." "It will be," the witch said. "It will be quiet in a soft way." She stepped to the window and set a thumb-sized taper on the sill. A drop of moonlight opened it. The glow was gentle. It met the night air and taught it to be kinder before it entered the house. Then she knelt and put the tiny lamp in the child's hands again. "This is for your room," she whispered. "Place it by the pillow, not too close. Just close enough for the light to find your breath." The child held the lamp as one holds a sleeping bird, steady, careful, almost still. Their eyes warmed. "What if the dreams run again?" they asked. "What if the horses become rivers, and the rivers become roads, and the roads become ladders, and the ladders become stars? Then you will put the lamp where you can see it with your eyes closed," the witch said. "You will say, 'Fold, little picture, fold.' You will watch one picture fold into the next, and the next, into the next, until there is only a soft, silver page. You will breathe the way the stream breathes. You will breathe the way the moths fly. Gentle, soft, peaceful." The child nodded, solemn as an owl and bright as a pear. "Fold," they said, testing the word for sleep. "Fold, little picture, fold." They smiled. "I think it works already." The door opened. A mother's face appeared in the quiet. Worry stood behind her, then sat down. "Thank you," she said to the candle witch, voice low, the kind of low that suits night. The witch lifted a hand. "The hollow helps," she answered, and the hollow seemed to bow. Before stepping away, she touched the child's brow with 2 fingers, a blessing as light as dust on a windowsill. "Sleep gently," she said to the child. "Dream softly." The words found the lamp, found the pillow, found the room. The child went inside. The door closed, like a page closing on a finished line. The candle witch turned for home. The path remembered her feet. The owls turned their heads and approved. The stream brought back the moon and set it in the grass for her to walk beside. At her door, she wrote in the ledger, "Child met, small lamp given, breath steady, path peaceful." She drew a star with a small curl at its tip, like a folded wing. Then she blew the taper at the table with a breath that was not a blow at all, only a soft agreement with sleep, and the cottage received her as the night received the hollow, quiet, kind, silver, and sure. All day, the hollow had worn a bright face, but toward evening, a restless breath began to move across the hills. It was not a harsh wind, only wakeful busy around hedges, quick at corners, tugging at vines that preferred to sway slowly. It ran its fingers through reeds until the notes grew thin. It worried the stream into little frills that would not lie flat. The candle witch stood at her door and felt the air ask for calm and not know how to find it. She lit a taper with moonlight and wrote in the ledger, "Hilltop watch, tall candles for the wind." Then she gathered what evening required. 3 tall candles, smooth and ivory, each set in a broad wooden saucer to stand steady on stone, a coil of soft flax cord for anchoring, 2 jars of moonlight, one deep and patient, one gathered from last night's meadow, a simple clay whistle shaped like a leaf, a square of linen, a small brush, a tin of honey salve for chapped bark that the wind might have roughened. She added a thermos of warm water, a pinch of lavender, and a small cup for comfort. The basket felt ready. The hollow felt ready. Her heart felt ready. She stepped outside. The vines at the eaves fluttered like gentle flags that had forgotten their message. Moths navigated bravely and then paused, wings opening and closing like slow hands. The stream at the wall kept its song but added a quick tremble, a silver shiver in the steady line. "Hush," the witch murmured, not to silence anything, only to give the evening a word it could lean on. The path to the hilltop went by way of beeches and a gate that clicked like a tiny bell. Ferns bent and rose. Leaves brushed her sleeves with 100 small greetings. Higher up, grass turned short and springy, stitched with time, bright with a few leftover daisies that kept their soft eyes open. The wind met her in little, eager runs, asking her attention, then scampering off along the slope. She did not scold. She did not chase. She climbed, steady as a clock that keeps bedtime. At the crest, the world widened in a soft, round way. The valley lay below like a bowl made by kind hands. The river drew an easy S. The meadows looked like folded blankets. The village windows began to glimmer. Above it all, the sky kept a pale wash of silver, deepening toward blue. The moon not yet risen but near. The wind roamed here with more room to be restless. It skated the grass. It tugged at her scarf. It tried to tell 5 stories at once. The candle witch set her basket beside a flat stone, polished by years of weather. She placed a palm on the stone, cool, steady, listening. "Let us help," she said to the hill. "Let us show the wind how to rest." From the basket, she lifted the first tall candle and set its saucer squarely on the stone. She wound a length of flax cord around the base and tied it to a small iron ring anchored in the rock from long ago, someone else's wise thinking, left here for nights like this. She uncorked the deeper jar. Moonlight moved inside with the patience of snow falling on still water. She tipped the jar, and a soft silver thread kissed the wick. The tall candle bloomed not with flame that leaps, but with a cool, even heart that holds. Light leaned outward and then stood, as if to say, "Here is how." She placed the second candle 10 paces along the ridge, where the wind came quickest. The third she set near a cluster of hawthorn, white blossoms gone now, branches thoughtful. Each base she tied, each wick she touched with moonlight. 3 steady glows rose on the hilltop, 3 quiet teachers. The wind came to see. It rushed and swirled, curious, going around the first candle, between the first and the second, along the hawthorn to the third. At each, it hesitated. It felt the light not as heat, not as push, but as an invitation to slow. The glow did not argue. It did not demand. It offered a rhythm, gentle, soft, peaceful, quiet, silver. The wind tried the rhythm, failed it, tried again. The witch took the clay whistle and held it to her lips. She did not blow hard. She breathed through it the way one breathes across the mouth of a jar. A low, hollow tone floated out, simple and round. She turned a little as she sounded it, so the note drifted toward each candle in turn. The wind listened. A second note, softer, lower, followed the first, as if one glow were speaking to another. Here is a pace. Here is a path. The grass responded first. It lay down by degrees, not pressed, only persuaded by calm. The quick shiver along the stream far below smoothed itself to a silver lane. The reeds drew their music in and found the middle line of their song. The hawthorn stopped fretting at old scars and kept its small, contented shape. The wind came again, but less sharply, as if wearing softer shoes. She walked the crest in a slow triangle from candle to candle, brushing the saucers with her fingertips, checking each chord. Where a knot felt tense, she loosened it just enough, for rest is not a rigid thing. Where the saucer rattled faintly on the stone, she tucked a piece of folded linen under its edge until it found its true seat. She hummed beneath her breath. The clay whistle answered now and then, a companion voice. The wind began to carry the tune, not loud, not exact, but willing. At the ridge's far shoulder, a small pine had been scuffed raw by seasons of lively weather. She knelt and rubbed a circle of honey salve into the bright wood. "You have stood," she told it. "Stand and rest while standing." The pine seemed to breathe deeper. Its needles clicked less. Its trunk felt cooled by the nearness of the silver light. She poured warm water into the cup and shook a pinch of lavender across it. The steam rose and braided itself with the wind. It changed the scent of the hilltop, a little less like anxious grass, more like quiet linen. The breeze tasted it and softened its mouth. It circled the first candle, then settled on the ground for the length of one patient heartbeat, then 2, then 3. Low on the slope, a ewe called once to a lamb that had wandered too near a tuft of tempting clover. The sound came up thin, and then thinned again into nothing. Even the sheep accepted the new pace. A kestrel arrowed along the edge and paused in the air, held by balance rather than effort, then let itself drift as if slipping into a deeper sky. The witch lifted the second jar, the meadow jar, and fed the first candle a breath more silver. She fed the second, she fed the third. The lights grew no brighter, they grew steadier. The air around them took on a cool, lunar taste, a flavor like spring water kept in a clay cup. The wind drank. It seemed surprised to find itself satisfied. She sat on the flat stone and set her bare palm to it once more. Under the skin of rock, she felt the slow memory of other evenings. A night of soft rain moving sideways, a winter gust that danced itself out by dawn, a spring gale that had shaken blossoms loose but left the bees asleep in their gold rooms. This hill had known all winds and was not unkind to any of them. It only waited for each to finish, and sometimes taught them how. The witch placed the clay whistle on her knee and spoke to the wind, the way she might speak to a child who has played too long. "You have run," she said. "You have moved through the grass and the hedges and the reeds. You have done your work. Now learn to rest." Rest is also a way of moving. Rest moves inside things. Rest moves inside breath. Learn the inside moving. The wind circled once, light as linen airing on a line, and then laid itself along the hilltop with a long exhale. The 3 candles did not flicker. They held their calm, and the calm extended outward like rings on a lake, but slower than water's rings, slower even than thought, as slow as moss grows on a north stone. The hollow below changed shape, not in outline, but in feeling. Fields seemed to settle a little closer to their hedges. The river seemed to remember its bed more deeply. The village windows shone, as if someone had drawn curtains of peace across each one. A fox stepped up from the gorse and watched the witch with level eyes. Its tail lay like a soft question on the ground. She bowed her head. The fox bowed back. Then Saturday together, they looked at the candles. Together, they listened to the wind, learning its new song. Time passed, but not in a straight line. It passed in breaths, in silver pulses, in the cooling of stone and the warming of hands around a cup, and the evening's color sliding toward night. At last, the moon lifted herself over the far ridge, round and kind, and gave the hilltop her full attention. The candles seemed to answer her by knowing what they were even more completely. The wind answered by resting more completely still. When everything held grass, stone, wind, moon, witch, fox, in a generous, peaceful balance, she rose. She checked each chord once more, not because she distrusted them, but because care is one way to bless the world. She touched the wax of each candle with the back of her finger. Cool, gentle, sure. She corked the jars and tucked the whistle into the basket. She stood a moment longer and closed her eyes. She let the new hush braid itself into her hair, into her shawl, into the paths she would walk home. "Thank you," she breathed to the wind for listening, to the hill for teaching, to the moon for watching, to the hollow for keeping. The fox flicked its ear and slipped away, steps soundless, now that the grass did not chatter beneath them. Down the slope, the path felt soft as felt. Ferns lifted and lowered like slow breath. The gate clicked once, politely. The stream by the cottage had lost its tremble and remembered its long, even line. In the doorway, she wrote in the ledger, "Wind calmed, 3 tall lights, hill steady, moon pleased." Then she drew a small crescent beside the star, a quiet emblem for winds that learn. Before sleep, she turned her face toward the ridge and saw the 3 gentle beacons on the crest, holding without effort. Their silver spread like a shawl across the hollow, taut and shared by air itself. "Sleep gently," she whispered to the grasses, to the hedges, to the wind, now resting like a wide, invisible sea. "Dream softly." The words rose and were taken up, not blown away, but carried slowly, softly, peacefully into the night. All afternoon, a fine, clear stillness gathered above the hollow, the kind of stillness that ripens light. By evening, the sky was washed as clean as a river stone. A soft coolness moved along the grass, not a breeze, only a quiet touch. The candle witch stood in her doorway and felt the hush arrive, wide and gentle. She lit a taper with moonlight and wrote in the ledger, "Great candle to the meadow, sky open, stars expected." She drew a small circle of dots around the words, a cluster like seeds, and smiled. From the lowest shelf, she lifted her largest candle. It was simple and pale, poured in a wide clay bowl the color of sand. She had made it for nights like this, steady, slow, spacious. She set it in a wicker tray beside 2 full jars of moonlight and a 3rd jar half filled from careful evenings past. She added a coil of flax cord, 3 small holders for children's hands, a clean linen cloth, a cup, and a sprig of rosemary to wake the sense of wonder gently without waking the body too much. She carried the tray close, not heavy, only important. The path to the open meadow began at the willow bend and went through a low gate that clicked like a soft, kind word. The hollow breathed with her as she walked. Frogs tuned their small silver instruments along the stream. Crickets set a quiet rhythm. The hilltop candles she had left for the wind still shone, calm beacons against the darkening ridge. The air tasted of water and leaf, and a faint sweetness, as if stars had a scent before they were seen. At the meadow, the grass seemed to rise to meet the sky. The place felt level with the first lights already kindled above the far trees. She set the great candle on a flat stone in the center, pressed the saucer into firmness, and tied a gentle anchoring line to a root that surfaced there like an old sleeping hand. She unstoppered the fullest jar. Moonlight waited inside, patient and cool, like milk that had remembered the night it was born. She poured a slow thread onto the wide wick. The light did not leap. It opened and opened, a bloom of silver in the clay bowl, a quiet lake cupped in hands. The glow spread outward and then settled inward, as if making a home for itself. It did not push the dark back. It invited the dark to sit. The meadow took the invitation. The shadows gathered around the bowl and rested. She carried the 2 small holders to the edge of the meadow and lit them as low companions. They kept the path soft, not bright, and taught feet to move gently. She breathed the rosemary for a long, even breath, and then tied it to the wicker handle, its green scent threading the air with a mild, wakeful kindness. Then she stood with her palms on the clay and felt the great candles hum steady, peaceful, wide. Stars began to arrive, at first few and far between, like shy guests, a bright one over the western ridge, a soft one over the beech grove, a cluster near the north, where the world feels deep, then more, then many. The sky opened like a book written in silver dots. The dots made lines. The lines made patterns. The patterns made nothing urgent, only a tender sense that everything had room. The villagers came without calling, drawn by the meadow's slow glow and the wide hush above it. The baker, hands clean, flour dreamed away by evening. The carpenter, with his hat in his fingers. The young mother and her child, the tiny lamp from the other night, now sleeping at home on a windowsill. The 2 brothers carrying a loaf between them the way one carries a warm stone. The teacher with a book he never opened. A weaver, the shopkeeper, a shepherd, 3 children with soft steps as if not to ruffle the air. They moved as the night moved gently, softly, peacefully. "Welcome," the candle witch murmured, and her voice lay across the meadow like a shawl. "Tonight the sky will do the telling." She lifted the half-filled jar and breathed over its mouth, then set it beside the clay bowl for later. She touched the rim of the great candle and felt its calm deepen, as if the earth itself had joined the glow with old silver it had saved. They sat in easy circles, no place more important than another. The grass was cool and friendly. The stream's song arrived on a low path of air and laid itself along the edges of listening. The first child to speak did not point. "It looks like the river," they said softly, "only slower and above." The teacher smiled and said nothing, which was the right lesson. The candle witch dipped her fingers into the clay bowl's light and lifted them out dry and cool. Nothing spilled, nothing taken, only the sense that her hands now spoke the same language as the sky. She held her palms upward, and the children copied, thinking they might catch a star. "You're catching it," she told them. "Stars are in breath." They breathed gentle, soft, peaceful, until their shoulders loosened and their mouths curved. On the ridge, the hilltop candles answered the new sky with their own quiet. Their silver lines seemed to draw threads up from the fields. Threads rose invisibly, then visibly, then invisibly again, a loom without noise. The great bowl joined the weaving, and for a moment the candle witch saw it plain. Fine, silver strands rising from earth to meet fine, silver strands falling from sky. Where they crossed, a warmth grew that was not heat, only assurance. Where they crossed, the hollow felt held. She unstoppered the second full jar and fed the great candle the smallest sip. The glow did not grow brighter. It grew deeper, like a well that knows water even at night. The carpenter's breath slowed to the stream's pace. The baker's hands opened and rested palms up on her knees. The young mother's child leaned against her and blinked slower, slower, softer. The two brothers shifted the warm loaf into one set of hands, then the other, sharing weight, sharing ease. "Tell us what you see," someone whispered, and the meadow answered with many small voices, each not louder than a cricket song, each gentle and true. A bridge silver, quiet, peaceful. A herd of sheep, but the sheep are stars, and the shepherd is a larger star that does not need a staff. A path that goes around and around and ends in the same soft place, like a lullaby. "Letters," the child from the tree day breathed, holding the chipped bowl at their heart. "Wishes written very small, going home." The candle witch listened and did not correct. She turned her face upward and let the sky right on her eyes. She felt the night widen inside her, a calm space where thoughts could set down their baskets and sit beside one another without comparison. She set 3 small, stone-weighted candles at the meadow's corners, lit them with a brush of silver, and the shape of the place became rounder yet. A fox crossed quietly and paused, then lay down with its head on its paws to watch the weaving. When the sky grew so rich with dots that counting felt like an old habit forgotten, the candle witch lifted the half-filled jar. This was the jar she saved for the edges of nights, for small kindnesses that finish the work. She tipped it over the clay bowl and let one long thread of moonlight pour into the heart of the great candle. The silver rose and met the star threads and held there, trembling once, then still. A thin gliding sound moved through the meadow water between stones, wind through harp strings, bees beyond hearing soothing and simple. The teacher touched a child's shoulder and did not speak. The shepherd slipped his hand over the dog's head, and the dog sighed. The weaver wiped one quiet tear from the corner of her eye and smiled at how light it felt to do that. The shopkeeper leaned back on both palms and let the night be the roof of every house he served. The baker thought of snow on flour, and flour on bread, and bread on hands, and hands at tables, and every table felt soft. Above them, a wide band of stars brightened into a silver river. It arced from north to south and seemed to rest a moment over Silent Hollow, as if blessing it with a slow bow. In that arch, the Candle Witch saw summers and winters, seedlings and harvest, windows and looms and ladders, and ovens and pencils and shells and cups and sleep. She saw sleep most of all, not as an ending, but as a gentle door. She leaned toward the clay bowl and whispered, "Teach us to be quiet." The bowl did nothing special. It only kept being itself, gentle, soft, peaceful, silver, quiet, and by being itself, it taught what it knew. The meadow learned, the villagers learned, the stars did not need to learn. They had always known. Time poured like honey slow, sweet, sure. No one marked it. If a thought rose, it rose like a moth and then settled on the open page of the sky. If a worry tried to speak, the weaving gave it a seat and a cup of silence, and it grew polite. The child with the chipped bowl fell asleep against the young mother's side, mouth parted, breath easy. Tiny lamp no longer needed, because the whole meadow was lamp enough. When at last the moon itself lifted, round and tender, the great candle welcomed her with a quiet widening of the glow. Moon and candle looked at each other and agreed to share the work. One for the high, endless calm, one for the near, homely peace. The hilltop lights nodded like old friends. The stream smoothed to a ribbon you could lay your head upon. The Candle Witch stood and moved among her neighbors with a linen cloth, tucking it over sleeping shoulders, under resting hands, over bare knees that might cool. She said nothing, and everyone heard. She fed the great candle one last small sip and corked the jars. She lifted the rosemary, breathed its green blessing, and tied it to the stone with a loop of flax, a sign that the night had been kind and the place had kept the kindness well. One by one, or in twos, the villagers rose as the body asks, not the clock. They left the meadow without hurry, carrying nothing but lighter hearts and the memory of silver on their skin. The Candle Witch waited until the last footfall softened into the path. She sat beside the clay bowl and looked at the sky until the shapes became simple again, dots and quiet, and the promise that dots and quiet would return. Before she went, she placed her palm on the warm edge of the bowl and spoke softly so the light would remember. Tomorrow, and the next, and the next, be gentle. The bowl hummed its small, even answer. She lifted her tray, now light as a sigh, and walked home with the stars riding with her in silence. At the cottage door, she wrote in the ledger, "Endless stars, great candle steady, threads between earth and sky, faces peaceful, sleep near." She drew a soft river of dots beneath, a silver path. Then she set a single tea light on the windowsill, touched it with moon, and let its cool bloom keep the night easy while the hollow breathed, soft and slow, under the endless dreaming sky. Morning slipped softly along the rafters and rested in the corners of the cottage like folded silk. The Candle Witch woke with quiet eyes. The stream at the wall told a low, even story. A moth slept on the window latch, its wings like two small leaves that had decided to dream. She lay still for 3 slow breaths, then rose with the 4th, letting the hush of the night of stars remain in her bones. She lit a thumb-sized taper with moonlight, only a petal of glow, and set it near the ledger. The page waited, calm and clean. She wrote, "Blessing round, one last candle for all." Her hand paused over the words. She drew a circle and placed 4 tiny points east, south, west, north. then a fifth in the center, a quiet heart. The taper hummed in agreement, a silver note you hear more with your skin than with your ears. The cottage asked for small care, and she gave it. She rinsed 2 cups and laid them mouth down to dry. She folded a linen cloth with the patience of tides. She brushed a few crumbs from the table into her palm and carried them outside for the sparrows. They arrived politely, soft feet on stone, beaks bright and brief. The vines at the eaves lifted their trumpets and caught a pale beam of day. Mint leaned in the basin's rim, giving the morning its first kindness. From the lowest shelf, she chose a single candle, round and steady, poured in a shallow bowl the color of river clay. Not the largest last night's great bowl still kept its place at the meadow, but the one she saved for endings that are also beginnings. Its wick lay quiet as a sleeping reed. She lifted 2 jars of moonlight, one full and still, one with the gentle taste of places the hollow loved, the hilltop's slow air, the meadow's soft breath, the river's silver echoes. She added a coil of flax cord and a ribbon cut from an old linen sleeve. She set them in the basket with a sprig of rosemary and a pinch of lavender to lay in the heart of the flame that is not flame. "Come," she said to the cottage, "keep house while I keep hollow." The shelves breathed, the window breathed, even the broom leaned as if listening. The path to the center of the hollow curved past all the places her evenings knew. The willow bend kept its green curtain. The beeches made a gate of shade. The hilltop candles were thin with use but still sure, small teachers finishing their day's lesson in silence. The meadow where stars had sat lay smooth and wide, as if sleep itself had pressed its cheek into the grass and smiled. Birds flew low and slow. The wind did not hurry. The hollow felt ready to recede. At the quiet heart of the valley, the ground rose just enough to make a gentle stage. There she laid the shallow bowl upon a flat stone that remembered many seasons. She tied the flax cord to a hidden iron ring in the rock, not to bind, only to honor the steadiness of small things. She breathed once over the wick. Then she uncorked the fuller jar. The moonlight moved within like milk, remembering the night. She tipped a thin thread onto the wick. The glow opened, petal by petal, until a cool, silver bloom cupped the morning. Not bright, not dim, sure. She crumbled the lavender between finger and thumb and let the scent fall through the light. She touched the rosemary to the rim, so the flame that is not flame would learn a memory of gardens. The air thickened with gentleness. She turned in a slow circle and faced the 4 small roads that led from village to hollow. Toward the east, where bread begins and doors first unlatch, she lifted her palm. For beginnings, she whispered, gentle, soft, peaceful. Toward the south, where work is warm and hands grow bright with use, for strength that rests. Toward the west, where windows find evening and voices lower, for endings that lean toward dream. Toward the north, where winter keeps quiet counsel, for patience, for quiet, for deep, silver still. She uncorked the second jar, the one that remembered places, and fed the candle a breath from each quarter. The light answered not with height, but with depth, the way a pond grows deeper under moon. The glow reached the grasses, touched the low branches, slid along the ribs of the hills. It did not climb, it spread. The hollow gathered it like a shawl drawn close. From the village path came the soft sound of steps that did not wish to disturb dew. A few neighbors arrived without speaking. The baker, with a clean apron folded over her arm. The carpenter, with hat in hand, fingers unbusy for once. The shepherd, the weaver, the teacher, the young mother with the child whose eyes now carried a new, quiet ease. The two brothers with a cloth-wrapped loaf not to share aloud, only to share by holding it together. They made a wide circle that was hardly a circle at all, only people sitting where the grass invited them. The candle witch nodded, and the nod felt like a song the body already knew. She touched the bowl's rim. "This is a blessing for all," she said. "Not for one roof, or one bed, or one pillow, but for every breath the hollow holds." The stream answered with a longer exhale. The hill sent down a slow yes. The tree of wishes stood far but near, and its leaves kept their listening. She lifted her hands and began the blessing the way she did, all quiet work, by breathing. In, out, gentle, soft, peaceful, quiet, silver, dream. The words made no sound, and every sound, she shaped them with her lips and let the light carry them where language could not. "For the houses," she murmured at last, voice low and even. "Let doors remember welcome, and windows remember calm. Let beds hold like boats on a smooth silver lake. Let pillows keep the shape of easy foreheads. Let kettles sing small lullabies when water meets heat. Let loaves cool into hands that have time to taste. For the paths," she went on, "let steps grow slower than worry. Let dust lie without hurry. Let hedges lean like kind grandmothers. Let gates click like soft bells. Let stones be round enough to be forgiving. For the fields," she said, "let grasses dream of rain, and rain dream of grasses. Let seeds rest with the knowing that spring is a promise kept in quiet places. Let sheep remember gentle shade. Let the scarecrow stand not as a threat, but as a watchman who loves the sky. For the hands," she added, and here her voice became even softer, as if speaking to palm lines. "Let work choose its pace by breath. Let fingers remember warmth, even after water. Let shoulders be allowed to lower. Let eyes close when they wish, without apology." She fed the candle a final, slow thread from the jar of places. The bowl's heart deepened, as if a quiet bell had been rung underwater. Across the circle, faces loosened. The teacher shut his book not because he had read, but because reading was not needed. The weaver's forearms relaxed in a way that promised cloth would drape kinder tomorrow. The child leaned against the young mother and watched a moth choose the light and not be harmed, then blinked long and slow. Now she turned to the small things that also ask blessing. For mice, safe doorways and crumb enough. For foxes, paths that pass beside sleep, not through it. For owls, soft air and true perches. For bats, pockets of night with no tangles. For frogs, steady water. For reeds, a key that never shrills. For stones, the patience to be stones. A quiet moved through the hollow, not silence, but a generous quiet that made room for every gentle sound. Someone sighed. Someone else matched that sigh a beat later, like two waves making one soft shore. The stream ran, peaceful. The wind sat with folded hands. The hill leaned closer to hear. The candle witch placed both palms over the bowl and closed her eyes. Inside them, the night of endless stars opened once more, not to dazzle, only to teach widening. She gathered that widening and poured it not with hands, not with jars into the light she kept. She thought of the river's echoes and the way they returned softer each time. She thought of the birds, wings folded in moon-soaked meadows. She thought of the tree that remembers wishes and lets them go as silver mist. She thought of the child whose busy dreams learned the word fold. She thought of wind that learned to rest. All the evenings folded into this one, and this one unfolded into all. When she lifted her hands, the bowl shone in the simple way of something that knows its work and has done it. She smiled, small and full. She looked around the circle and spoke the last words aloud so they would settle where needed. "Sleep gently," she said, and the words fell like petals. "Dream softly," she said, and the words fell like snow. "Rest deeply," she said, and the words fell like warm rain. She turned to the 4 roads and gave the same 3 sentences to each, with the smallest bow. Then she faced the center again and spoke with no sound at all, letting the light carry a blessing to those who were not present. The traveler on a far lane, the sailor thinking of shore, the widow at a quiet table, the infant turning toward sleep. The villagers rose by and by, not at once. They touched the rim of the stone, or the air above the bowl, or the hem of their own sleeves, small gestures that said, "Thank you," without weight. They went without hurry, steps light, faces easy, shoulders lower than before. The child waved with 2 fingers, as one waves to a dream one will meet again. The candle witch remained until the circle of grass remembered being only grass. She tied the linen ribbon to the stone, a sign the blessing had been spoken and would keep speaking in silence. She corked the jars and lifted the basket that now felt almost empty because most of what she had carried could not be held. Home gathered her with familiar calm. The stream set its silver along the wall. The moth returned to the latch and slept. She wrote in the ledger, "Blessing given, bowl steady, faces softened, hollow, quiet, and sure." She drew a final star, larger than most, but pale, the kind of star that knows itself without shining too bright. Before sleep, she lit one more little candle, the bedside watch. She touched it with moonlight and set it where its cool glow could find her breath. She lay down. The cottage held her. The hollow held the cottage. The moon lifted above the ridge, patient and kind, and carried her wish outward. If anyone had listened at a door, they might have heard the soft thread of words drift through the open window and across the valley, over hedges and paths, roofs and nests, stones and streams. They would have heard them reach the hilltop and the meadow and the willow bend and the old tree and the farthest gate. They would have felt them on their forehead like a cool hand. Sleep gently, dream softly, rest deeply. And the words went on, silver and quiet, into every room and under every sky, until even the smallest worry found a place to lie down and close its eyes.